Hello, how's it going? Welcome back. Before we get into this, let me just talk about a couple of things. You may remember my Yokomo MR4 TC Custom had a the Ferrari shell, and I smashed it up.
Oh, I've got... Oh, no! Oh, sorry, Yokomo.
So here's the Yokomo. It's now running an Alfa Romeo 155 V6 Ti 2.5. It doesn't quite line up. The wheelbase is slightly, there's a Tamiya shell. It's a little bit too far forward there. It's about right at the back, but yeah, it seems that Yokomo has slightly longer wheelbase than the Tamiya chassis this is built for. You can't move the wheelbase back, unfortunately, on this touring car. It's not too bad, but it's not perfect. I had this shell sitting for years in the cupboard. Years. I was going to put it on my Lossy Triple XS. Never got around to it. But now I've got it on the Yokomo. It looks really good. And in fact, it's lovely to have, and I'll show you in a second, it is lovely to have a Mercedes 190e 2.5 16 Evo 2 and an Alfa Romeo 155 V6 Ti next to each other. I just like it. The second thing is I'm making this RAF RC rescue launch from my dad, because his dad was in the RAF and was a pilot of an RC rescue launch. He was wanting to get this running. Unfortunately, this is the sort of building that I've got no experience with whatsoever. It's sort of, what's it called? Plasticard? What's it called? Vacuum molded something. I've never done anything like this. I know you're supposed to glue parts of the hull together. I don't know what materials I'm supposed to use, the adhesive I'm supposed to use. My dad's 70 now, so he's getting on a bit, and I would like to have this done while he's still, you know, able to go places and you know, drive it around. So if anybody has any tips as to what to do, what material to use, etc., that'd be really appreciative. I'd be really appreciative of that, because I've had this for a while now, a few years, and I haven't gotten around to doing it anymore, apart from, as you can see, painting it grey. So I'm kind of rubbish. Anyway, on to the subject of today's video. This is my Pinecone Models RC car, but it's more about the UDIRC cars, which you can regularly get in the UK. This is the same as the UDIRC. You get the breaker and all the rest of it. 1606, whatever it is, silly Cody names. Everybody was banging on about these things. Oh, they're great fun. Oh, they're amazing value for money. Oh, you just need a group of them to run around and they're a good laugh. Yes, they're cheap, but you know, they're good fun, and they're a great entry level or a great supplement to more serious stuff. You know, yada 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 yada. It was you know, everybody was banging on about them. It was a couple of years back now. And when I first tried them, this one, and my brother-in-law Matthew had the breaker, I think it's the breaker, the UDI. They're the same car. These are the Pro brushless versions. And we used them. First time did not go well at all. They were, well, first of all, his was simply bouncing all over the place. That's because it has non-oil filled shocks. They're not shock absorbers at all. They're just springs. So that was oscillating like crazy. Mine was oscillating like crazy, and also going like this. And also I crashed the front of it, and the rear suspension broke when I hit the front.
I hit the front? How did it break the back? It did, I was...
Maybe that's why.
It seemed to just...
Maybe that's why it jumped round, because it spat that out.
No, but... oh, I might have done.
Which was confusing. Also, the throttle response was abysmal. I was convinced that I wasn't on throttle when it took off, jumped and hit the curb, but I wasn't entirely sure if it was my fault or not. So my first impressions were not great. Neither were his. His were better than mine, but mine were not great. Since then, though, we've had a bit of an epiphany with these things, and I can say that you guys are right. Mostly. It is, let me just unplug that. It is a good fun RC. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Also, my heatsink, motor heatsink came off, and I ran over it.
How did that happen? I ran over it. How did that happen?
So I've just ditched it. Yes. Oil-filled shocks are a must. An absolute must. They add £15 onto the price. We'll get back to the price. But once you do that, and they're oops, they're threaded. Got a threaded body, so you can adjust them to how you want them. Once you've got them adjusted, get the thing all nice and compliant and running right. The handle not too bad. Not the stickiest rubber in the world, neither on this one or Matthew's one. They tend to slide. You can't really put the power down. However, I mean, they're not great. You can tell they're not great. However, this was, I believe it might be in October, but it might be in November. I can't remember. One of the two. End of October, we'll say. In Scotland, it was about, I don't know, 8 degrees Celsius or something, and it was a damp road. So you're not going to get great grip anyway. On a summer's day with hot, sticky tarmac, they'll probably be absolutely fine. Anyway, I didn't realise that I completely forgot that they've got a gyro. You can adjust it on or off. This was ever so slightly adjusted on, which is one of the reasons mine was wiggling around so much. There was also the issue with this suspension arm was bound up when it was over tightened from the factory. So now turning that, by the way, the gyro on these things, useless. Not worth the money. Not worth any time, not worth what you're paying for. It'd be better if the car didn't have it and the retail price was lower. The gyro is appalling. If you turn it up full, it won't go in a straight line. I know gyros are supposed to help it stay in a straight line, or when you're trying to drift, it helps correct you so you can pull off nice power slides. These will simply spin out. Go in a straight line, they'll go whoa, and crash. Or if you're trying to, even if you're on half gyro, you try to turn right, it doesn't go, oh, I'm going to try and help. It'll go, nope, we're going left. I mean, it's appalling. It's terrible. So just sack off the gyro. It's useless. I can hear a siren. Anyway, but with the oil-filled shocks and the gyro off, it's actually really good fun to drive. And we had a good laugh. Now, the throttle response is still appalling. I've been told by several of you, thank you for your inputs, that the brushed version has better throttle response and is the better car. I can see that. And these are not exactly lightning quick. I can't see the brushed one being that much slower. So it might be worth saving your money and get the brushed one. To be honest, that's probably what I would do now. But you add 15 quid on, get your oil-filled shocks, and your car is awesome for the money. Great fun. Especially if there's 2 or more of you and you just slide around and you know the limitations and you're trying to work around the limitations, and it is a good laugh. Now, there is a problem, and the reason why you guys are mostly right about how awesome this thing is. And that is, a couple of years back, this was about as good as an entry-level cheap RC got. Unfortunately, 2 things have happened. The retail price has gone up and rivals have come to the market. This was £75 for the brushless version, or £80 for the brushless, whatever it was. I think it was 75. So that left you £90 plus, including the oil-filled shocks, and you're good. Now the retail in the UK is now £75 for the brushed one. Retail for this exact one, brushless one, is 105. Now I'm sorry, that's too much. Bear in mind you've got to add the oil-filled shocks, so that's 120. Not worth it. In any way whatsoever. Just not worth it. If it was me, I would still consider buying the brushed one. Frankly, I'd get the Beetle. I think that looks fantastic. But whatever one you like the look of. And yes, £105, it's just too much. It's even more if you get the really ugly drag car one. Inexplicably, it's the same car. That's your money. But I would not spend 105 for this, even if it came with the oil-filled shocks. And it doesn't. Now, to compound that, as I said, there are rivals. Specifically speaking of, I was going to say 2 models, but they're not technically 2 models. The FTX Tracer comes in monster truck or truggy form. It's also 1/16. You also get a brushed or brushless version. They're different layouts, but they're very similar. Shaft drive, 4-wheel drive, 16 scale, independent suspension. The difference is the Tracer, oddly, has threaded shock bodies, adjustable shocks, but they're still not oil filled. It's a bit of a bizarre thing to do, but whatever. The Tracer is £75 for the brushed version, and it's actually 120 for the brushless. So the brushed version's the same, the brushless version is slightly more expensive than this. It's a truggy or a monster truck. It's bigger, it's tougher. You'll be able to run on more terrain types. and it's the same money, essentially. I mean, yeah, you do need to upgrade oil-filled shocks on that as well, but essentially in the same ballpark. Brushless tracer for 120 plus oil-filled shocks, I wouldn't get that either. I would not get that either. You're in the realm of cheap 1/10 by that point. So I wouldn't spend that sort of money on a 1/16 personally. The brushed one, just like this, is more of an option. £75 for a monster truck or a truggy with bigger tires, bigger wheels, more ground clearance, more presence. That'd be pretty good. Like this, the Tracer has a 2-in-1 ESC receiver. I'm not a fan. Incidentally, when I said I'm not sure if I was on throttle when it took off and hit the curb, I'm now convinced I absolutely wasn't on throttle, because when Matthew and I were testing this afterwards with the oil-filled shocks, we had a great time, but both cars had a mind of their own a little bit and would occasionally take off and do something you didn't tell them to do. Or they would, for some reason, switch the lights on or off. There's a button on the transmitter, and we didn't press them, and the lights were going on or off. Plus, Matthew's had an ever so slightly shorter range than mine. So there's a little bit of question mark over the quality of the electronics in this. The FTX for me is the same. I've used 3 models of FTX with the 2-in-1 ESC, and all 3 of them have been questionable. The first one was the FTX Surge, which is an old model now. It's not available anymore. That was the best of them, actually, but it still had a little bit of a throttle and steering delay. Not too dissimilar to this. I think the throttle response was slightly better than this, but not by much. The second one was the original FTX Outback, Matthew's one, and that 2-in-1 failed on its very first ever use. Since then, we replaced it with proper separate ESC and receiver. Never had an issue since. And the third one was the FTX, what was it? It was a truggy, I had it. Comet, that's the one, Comet truggy. That 2-in-1 was absolutely abysmal. I hated it. The range was shocking, the response was shocking, it glitched in and out. It was worse than this by a long way. But I think that one's slightly suspect, slightly faulty or whatever, but not great. Again, those were a few years ago now, so FTX might have made an improvement, but I can't be certain. The point is, it should be on par with this. It's on par with this in terms of spec, and it's on par with this in terms of pricing. So, yes, the Tracer is a viable competitor to this, especially when you consider the fact they can run on more terrain types. However, there is another alternative. The Black Zon Slider. I was going to say Strider there. Black Zon Slider. Now, the Black Zon Slider is the same car as the FTX Tracer. You also get a truggy or a monster truck. They look different. They've got different paint jobs. The chassis is the same. I don't know if the electronics are exactly the same, but they are the same spec. 2-in-1, blah, 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 blah. Now, the difference is you don't get a brushless version at the moment, anyway, of the Black Zon Slider. What you do get is the brush version. So the FTX Tracer is £75 retail for the brush version, which is quite good. This is £75 retail for the brush version, which is quite good. The Black Zone Slider is £64. So you've got a car that's bigger than this, big chunky tyres, same scale of course, big chunky tyres, off-road, can run on the road or off the road, and it's £11 cheaper. And also then you can get the oil-filled shocks, etc. That's a good deal. That's a good deal. You could then fit the brushless electronics from the FTX Tracer into the Black Zone Slider if you so want. I'm not sure I would. I mean, maybe. But again, you're then bumping it up towards 1/10 price. You should just accept what you have. If you can get a brushless one of these, it might be worth, for a decent price, it might be worth going for. Personally, I wouldn't do it again, not with the increase in price now. The brushed one is the same price as the brushless one used to be. In fact, I got this from China or Banggood or AliExpress or some, another one of these junky websites, and I paid what the brush one is now for this one. So time hasn't been kind to these. Another thing to be aware of is this doesn't look as good as it used to, not because of crash damage or German Shepherd damage, which is through there, but also I had to trim the arches quite severely. Pushing the shocks up and down, all 4 wheels were binding within the arches. They're just not flared enough, so I've had to cut the sides off them to get them to clear. If they fully compress, it still touches, but it's fine now. Same with Matthew's UDIRC breaker. How to cut the arches. You won't have that problem with the FTX or the Black Zone. But of course, this is an on-road and I like on-roads. So I'm not going to tell you what to get or what not to get. Just be aware this is not the same value as it used to be, and there are now viable alternatives. I wouldn't personally buy the FTX Tracer just because the Black Zone slider is the same truck. Okay, the brush one, fair enough. I mean, if you're talking about £11 difference and you like the look of the Tracer better, or if your local hobby shop stocks the Tracer and doesn't stock the Black Zone, which I can see happening because Tay Models, for example, the Black Zone, did I mention the Black Zone is under the HPI umbrella? I don't know if I did, but it is. The Black Zone is under the HPI and Maverick umbrella. HPI, Maverick and Black Zone. Tay Models, where I shop, my friend owns, stocks FTX because CML supply FTX, and they're very good with their shipping, they're very good with their customer service, they're very good at getting back to you, they're very good at warranties, they're all good at that sort of thing. HPI, on the other hand, is still terrible at everything like that. I love HPI, I've said this before, but if Alan has to put in an order for an HPI model, he's got to order several £100 worth before they'll even give him reasonable shipping. If he orders 1/16th model from HPI, the postage is more than the model. So that's not great. So if your local hobby shop stocks FTX, they'll be able to get the parts in cheap. I've bust out suspension arm, I've stripped the spur gear. They'll be able to throw those parts in with the next order, not a problem. It's slightly different at the moment for HPI. They're not brilliant at that sort of thing. So they might be more reluctant to get the spares in if you strip the spur and they've got to put in a huge order to make the postage worthwhile. That's just one of these things. So £11 different there. That doesn't seem to be the end of the world, but factually speaking, £64 is better value than £75 for the same model. So if you want to get the very best for bang for your buck and use something like Model Sport and they have the Black Zones in stock, then £64 is very good. I mean, that's what the brush one of these was all the way back when it was straight from China, and then you had to pay postage from China. Just remember to get off-road shocks and you're sorted. The Beetle's really nice though. I don't even like Beetles particularly much, but there's something about it. Maybe it's because it's so old school, it's so 60s or something. I think it's based on Herbie. It looks like Herbie. And this looks so good. So despite everything I've just said, probably buy the Beetle. They're alright. They're alright. They're not bad at all. They're good fun. They're not bad. Better than a slap in the face.